you would be kind enough to state your affiliation and keep your question short.
U.S. Consulting Firm, GEI Consulting. You've mentioned that the 6 desal plants are being operated with the use of renewable energy. What is the renewable technology that you guys are focused on?
We have a renewable energy target in Australia which mandates that we will get to 20% of renewable energy in our power system by 2020. And I can say to you that it's not technology specific in the sense that we are aiming to get to that renewable energy target of 20% either by solar or by wind or by geothermal or possibly even more novel technologies. When the renewable energy target was brought in, and I'll go back to say that the 6 desalination plants effectively fulfil their renewable energy requirement through that renewable energy target mechanism, and I won't go into the way it exactly works. Any of you who are familiar with the renewable energy mandating here in California know that there's a degree of complexity about the scheme. There's a degree of complexity about our scheme and the way in which it interacts with energy retailers. But the 6 desal plants buy renewable energy sourced energy. And when we introduced the renewable energy target under the former Conservative government, it was a much lower target then in 2001. The expectation was that it was going to be taken up almost wholly by solar. That has not proved to be the case. Increasingly, it seems that the bulk of the 20% renewable energy target by 2020 is going to be met by wind. And again, we're 7 years off from the target. We think we're going to meet the target. In fact, we're certain we're going to meet that target. We're probably going to exceed it. Whether or not it continues to be the case that it's going to be filled largely by wind, it may change again. These are price-driven outcomes.
Adam Lovell from the Water Service Association of Australia can help out a little bit with that answer because our members
I defer to the greater technical experts in the room.
And it's primarily wind, the renewable energy sources. The second desal plant in Perth has also a component of solar, which is a great way forward over the past year. So primarily wind, but getting into the solar area now too.
Thank you. We have time for 2 more questions. Gentlemen towards the front here.
Jeff Yarney from California. I'm a consultant. I'm going to tailgate on her question and his, and keep it at macro level so you don't have to delve into the technical issues. The economics has been a real issue with desalination and energy, particularly renewable energy. And desal is something that's being looked at more intensively in the U.S. One of the big graphs is the cost, and it's much more energy intensive. If you come to California, desal is at least 10 times more expensive than fresh water. And the big cost is energy. So with these renewable energies, can you talk about how you managed from an economic standpoint to keep the energy requirement within an acceptable range of cost?
I'll be direct and say no, but I'm hoping that someone in this room has got a greater knowledge of how these desal plants, how the economics of these desal plants work. All of the state governments which have invested in the desal plants, so it's a state responsibility rather than a federal responsibility, have made a requirement of the desal plants that they take renewable energy sources. There's a great concern about investing in desalination, knowing, as you just put it in your question, that there's a very, very high energy requirement for them to operate. But equally in Australia, we don't have the fresh water that's coming. We don't have alternatives. It's been a very vexed political question. One of the aspects that's made the politics of it easier has been that requirement that desal plants use renewable energy sources. And we're still seeing the difficulty of politics in my home state of Victoria, because with the ending of the drought and a return to what are regarded as semi-normal rainfall, the water storages are filling again, and it's being suggested that perhaps the desalination plant that was invested in by the former state government wasn't required, because it's not presently being used to contribute anything to Victoria's water supply. I still think, and I'm in fact certain, that it was the correct decision by that former state government to invest in the desalination plant, because the drought that it was built in the middle of will return, or a drought is going to return. And at that point it will become clearer that it was the right thing to do to build a desalination plant. Sorry I can't answer your question directly about the particular ways in which those desal plants are operated, but I'm hoping that someone else in the room can have a go.
Maybe we can catch up over morning and see. I won't go into too much detail. In terms of the energy use, most of the contracts for renewable energy was set up. For instance, if you ever drive down to Canberra from Sydney, you can see a big wind farm on the other side of Lake George, and that's more or less dedicated to the desal plant in Sydney. It's not built solely for it, because currently 4 of the desal plants mothballed have been commissioned and taken out of action because the operating costs are not required, otherwise they're passed on to the customers anyway. But that wind farm there, for instance, provides green energy into the grid. So energy use overall for the desal plants is coming down. I think the Perth desal plant is operating best practice at about 3.5 kilowatt hours per kilolitre. I'm sorry, I haven't done the conversions to US metrics on that, but that's a significant improvement when they started off around 5. And the federal government's invested in the Centre of Excellence for Desal, which is doing some really great work in bringing down energy costs associated with desal. I would not say that energy use associated with desal in Australia is the #1 concern. It's more about bad timing. You know, the desal plants were built, all of a sudden it rained. But I have no doubt, as Australia grows, population growth in our big cities continues at great strides, that these desal plants will be required. They're an insurance policy. They provide a climate-independent water supply, which will be required in the future.
Thank you. Let's have one last quick question.
Hi, I'm with the California Public Utilities Commission and the State Water Board. I have a quick question also about desal. I'm curious as to what the Australian federal government's role is in approving these projects, if any, and if the national government has created any kind of loading order for water, basically saying recycling and reuse before desal, or if there's an official or unofficial policy on that.
The federal government's got a different role constitutionally in Australia than the federal government here, and in fact we've got the constitutional power situation directly reversed. The Commonwealth, the federal government has a list of specific powers which it is given, which does not include water supply. And part of the problem that we had in resolving the Murray-Darling Basin, in fact part of the problem we've had resolving water policy generally, is that at all times it has needed to be a cooperative federal and state matter in order to reach agreement. Specifically in relation to these individual desalination plants, because water supply, and particularly urban water supply, is a state responsibility, the approval of those individual desalination plants has always been a state government responsibility, and the federal government would only have an involvement in an approval process for an individual desalination plant if some environmentally significant matter of a national level of importance was raised by the project. So it's possible to conceive of a desalination plant that was discharging to the ocean in a particularly environmentally significant place, some rare species. The Commonwealth Government, for example, has environmental responsibility that's conferred on it by the Ramsar Convention. You might have a particular bird habitat. At that point, the federal government would have an approvals role. But if you don't have an environmentally significant matter at the national level, these desal plants are all able to be approved by individual state governments without reference to the national government. The national government has not adopted, to go to the second bit of your question, has not adopted that order of priority as yet, and different states have taken different, have made different responses to it as well. So we've got a degree of mixed policy in Australia in that area.
Thank you. Would you join with me in thanking the Minister once more?